Dark Souls 3 has about 24 damaging sorceries and at least that many enemies, so today we're going to beat Dark Souls 3 using only sorceries, but only once. For the uninitiated, the rules are simple. I can only use sorceries, and if I defeat an enemy using a sorcery, I must discard it. Okay, it's been 3 years, I want to say, since I played this game, so we'll see how this one goes. I wasn't worried. I genetically have incredible muscle memory, and I won't elaborate on that. So I budgeted about 3 hours to get past Gundyr, Vort, and either Watchers or Sage, along with collecting any early game materials that I would need. That estimate would turn out to be more or less accurate, just not in the way I was expecting. Thankfully, the Sorcerer starts with 2 pretty OP spells, Soul Arrow and Heavy Soul Arrow. This means that Gundyr took a grand total of 10 seconds to beat, and we were off to the races. Make your way over to Firelink Shrine and place the Coiled Sword in the Bonfire Pit. Next, I leveled up my intelligence with the souls that I got from Gundyr and discarded Soul Arrow. Then I went up to the roof where my muscle memory that I mentioned earlier allowed me to rapidly search how to make the DS3 Firelink roof jump, and boom, we're up there. Hey, alright, cool. Inside the building's roof, there's an Estus Shard and the covetous Silver Serpent Ring. This ring gives you 10% more souls per soul, if that makes sense. Now to the High Wall of Lothric. Once again, only a few items of note. A few souls, a couple Titanite shards, and the Cell Key for Greyrat's Cell. There's also a Mimic here, which has a rare chance to drop a Symbol of Avarice, a helmet that increases soul yield, but I don't have a free spell to use even if it was a guaranteed drop, so I'd have to skip that for now. You can either grab the banner now or after the fight, doesn't matter, then head into Vort's room. This guy's about to get bodied. And it looks like I'm not the only one who hasn't played this game for 3 years. Vort seemingly forgot his R1 button. A few casts of Heavy Soul Arrow appear to jog his memory, but by that time, it's a bit too late. 11 casts in total, and the first real boss of the game falls. At which point we can raise the banner to the Undead Settlement and discard Heavy Soul Arrow. Then say hello to Yoel, or Yoel, who we will completely forget to use later. Next we spend 10 minutes theorizing how to get Loretta's bone down, before realizing we can just jump into it, grab that for later, and we're going to skip Greatwood for now. Transposition will be important later on, but I don't currently have any spells to spare. I also skip speaking to Sigurd for reasons I will inadequately explain later. Sprint through the Road of Sacrifices and make your way into Crucifixion Woods. Say hi to Horus, and find Orbeck.
What do you want?
The most important NPC in this run, as he sells most of our sorceries. We could go see what Orbeck has in stock now, but since we're out and about, there's a few goodies we should grab. One is the Sage Ring, which increases our casting speed, and the rest are in Farron Keep. As per usual, pick up any Estus Shards, Titanite Shards, and anything we can sell for more souls. The non-negotiables here are the Sage Scroll, which gives us more spells, the Crown of Dusk, which boosts our magic attack, and the Dream Chaser's Ashes, which lets us buy Titanite Shards from the Old Maid. Finally, you can give the Sage Scroll to Orbeck and check out his updated inventory. Even though he sells Soul Arrow and Heavy Soul Arrow, we've already used those, so I will not be purchasing them again. Oh, and I made a quick pit stop to release Greyrat from his cell. Now we've got to make a choice. We can either head to Sage or go to Watchers. Both bosses are annoying in their own unique ways, and I ultimately decided that Crystal Sage was the lesser of the two evils. So I made my way over to the Crystal Sage's boss arena, and it didn't take long for me to realize that I both overestimated my damage and underestimated that of hers. Even Great Soul Arrow was only doing 85 damage per cast. This was going to be a slog, and I wasn't even sure if I had enough Estus to complete the fight. All of these problems, of course, were exacerbated in the second phase, where I ran into yet another issue. Remember, it's been 3 years, okay? I was having trouble distinguishing real Sage from clone for 2 reasons. Firstly, I was too stupid to notice they're casting different spells, and secondly, I'm too colorblind to see the difference. So not only would I never survive an entire fight with Sage, but due to resource constraints, this endeavor was untenable anyways. Alright, whatever. Over to Watchers. On the way you can grab the Golden Scroll. Now, these are exclusively non-damaging spells, so their use cases are quite limited, but like, I don't know, might as well pick it up. Grab this bonfire, which we will become very familiar with, and head over to the boss arena. This is where I must make a request of you, dear Watcher. Please do not become frustrated with me. This fight is much easier than I portray it to be. For some reason I cannot recall, I had decided on using either Farron Dart or Farron Hail for this fight. 2 spells that are extremely suck. Farron Dart is Farron Dart, and Farron Hail has low damage, a long cast time, and it doesn't consistently stagger the Abyss Bros. Hail also stunlocks your own character during casting, which isn't particularly helpful. I did eventually try Great Soul Arrow, which outperforms both previous spells, but that's a pretty low bar. The main issue with GSA is that it's dodged quite easily, and I don't know if I was just getting unlucky, but the third Abyss spawn would almost always target me. This was not a foursome I was interested in, and that's a golf reference, not a sexual one, okay, you dirty, dirty voyeurs, which meant I spent a long time losing to these guys. It's not something that I'm proud of, and I deeply regret it. After losing to Sage and Watchers, I needed a kind of mental reset. It is not the case that I am bad at the game I profess to be good at. No. The problem was, my int score wasn't high enough, and I had too few Estus flasks. They don't call me Yes Johns for nothing. So I went back and rounded up any spare souls I might have missed, along with a few more golden seeds. The souls let me level up int twice, and then I went back to Sage. The second go-round was a bit better. The damage increase was minuscule, but the mental buff was massive. And I remembered you could steady chant, which boosts sorcery damage by about 10%. This was hardly useful here, but would be a lifesaver later on. With Sage defeated, I could finally head towards the cathedral. Inside, you can actually go straight to Ariandel through Gale without any requirements, which is something I totally forgot about. Knowing enough not to pass up a good opportunity, I dove right in. Mostly there's just a lot of large souls here, and every single enemy that will one-shot you is also here. Once we cross this bridge and grab the bonfire inside the church, we run into a little bit of a quandary. I'm supposed to discard sorceries after I defeat enemies, that's the whole premise of these runs. So the question is, did I defeat the bridge? Yes, with ease. But was it my enemy? I'll leave that question for the scholars to contemplate. As for myself, I needed to get down these routes without falling, run past mad crabs, and make my way up this snowy hill where I can eventually find the sorcery Snap Freeze. Perhaps fortunately for me, we aren't going to fight Sister Frida or Mr. Father because we don't have enough sorceries, so get the heck out of this place and back to the cathedral. There's a weapon I want called the Scholar's Candlestick that can only be obtained through Greyrat's questline, so at some point we're going to have to speak with Patches, but we don't have to do that quite yet, so instead, speedrun your way to the Deacon's boss area. I attempted to use Snap Freeze on these guys to save myself a better spell, but if I had known beforehand how trash this spell was, I likely wouldn't have bothered. Now I'm sure there's some OP combo with a fire weapon and frostbite procs or whatever, but used alone, this ain't it. Also, I'm pretty sure on this boss specifically, it's actually impossible to beat using Snap Freeze because of the Deacon's healing. We'll pocket that one for later and return with a sorcery that all but guarantees my victory, Soul Greatsword. Not much to say about the fight, it was very similar in difficulty to the Gundyr and Vord fights. Once we get the Small Doll and Soul of the Deacons, we can head back to Watchers for part 2. Here are the sorceries currently at my disposal minus Soul Greatsword, so feel free to judge my decision making. I opted to try Farron Hail once more, and that went as well as it did previously. Farron Flash Sword was the next choice, and it completely trivializes this fight. It also marks the start of a pattern in this run where I take the easy path, the road more traveled, as they say, a decision that will culminate in a big problem against a certain someone later on. There's a lesson in here about not avoiding the hard things, but for now, I'm going to keep doing just that. When the Watchers fall, we now have access to the Catacombs of Karthus and more importantly, Smoldering Lake. But to get down there, we have to defeat another bridge. Alright, this time the sorcery was used to beat the bridge and kill a bunch of enemies, as you can see here. Okay, so we'll discard it the next opportunity we get. Now, Smoldering Lake is super important, because it's pretty much the only place you can get large Titanite shards without having to defeat enemies before Irithyll. I think there's 8 here, and then like another 3 in Demon Runes. Also, the Shield of Want is in this area, which, whilst my arm is shielded, it will increase the amount of souls yielded. Hell yeah, get rhymed. I also nabbed a few extra, well, I shouldn't say I. This brave little skeleton ran up these stairs and kicked this guy's ass with his sword, and this ended up giving me something like 20,000 extra souls, so nice. After upgrading my weapon, Wolnir the High Lord is up next, and I don't know what to say. Gimmick boss, meet my gimmick move. Pestilent Mist is an interesting spell with not that many use cases. It's infamously good on Midir due to its max HP damage, and it doesn't wake sleeping enemies, as you can see here. You can also use it on Greatwood to prevent stage 2, but at least in that fight, if I were to kill a Hollow accidentally, I'm kinda screwed. And spoiler alert, I didn't have enough sorceries to fight Midir, so Wolnir it is. I actually did try other sorceries on Wolnir like Great Baron Dart, but unless you're an absolute Hypergod Gamer legendary lad, it's quite hard to hit his bracelets without being able to target them, so you end up doing basically 0 damage. Wolnir falls after 4 or 5 casts of Pestilent Mist, and after a very convincing victory celebration. Alright, yeah! And discarding Pestilent Mist, we are finally able to move onto Irithyll. When I lit this bonfire, I noticed I had quite a few boss souls at this point, so I went back to Undead Settlement and equipped Great Baron Dart. I figured transposition might actually be useful, maybe. I headed over to Greatwood, and Greatwood's probably the best fight for the Dart spells. Great Baron Dart's damage is still abysmal, but if you locate the tree's pus sacks and hit them enough, they'll pop and deal a couple hundred damage each time. Once you've had your popping fill, Greatwood will either be dead, or left with so little HP that it doesn't matter, and a few casts will finish the job. Once we have the Transposing Kiln, we can discard Great Baron Dart and talk to our pal Ludlith. There's actually fewer sorceries than I thought. Wolnir's Soul gives a Pyromancy, which we'll look for on the next playthrough, which means we can currently buy Deep Soul from the Soul of Deacons, and Crystal Hail from the Crystal Sage. I mentioned the Scholar's Candlestick earlier. This is technically a weapon, which I guess I suppose anything's technically a weapon, but when held it acts similarly to the Dragon Rings, boosting Sorcery AR. Now I thought that the Candlestick was only obtainable if Greirat survives his second pillage to Irithyll. That's not true, but I didn't know that. And even if I had, I'd still prefer the little guy survives. There are 2 NPCs that can save Greirat, Patches and Sigurd. The entire reason I wanted to go with Patches is because souls are a rare commodity, and Patches will save Greirat, ostensibly, for free. If you go the Sigurd route, you gotta pony up about 20k souls, which, specifically this early, is kind of hard, but mostly I was just being cheap. Then I raised the thing, talked to P, almost got murdered, went around the roof, and spoke to P again. This is supposed to spawn Patches at Firelink, except he wasn't there. Another way you can spawn Patches is by giving him a second chance at murdering you by letting him lock you in this tower. But to do so, you have to purchase a key that is perhaps not coincidentally 20,000 souls. Super. Once Patches is back, you can send Greirat on his second pillage, then tell Patches where he went, and he will allegedly save Greirat. We'll see if that's true in a bit. I made a small detour to go fight Old Demon King in Smoldering Lake because 1, I needed runes, and 2, I read somewhere that beating Demon King can initiate the next part of Greirat's quest. No idea if that's true. I've seemingly fumbled every part of this questline. Crystal Hail actually worked really well here. Usually it's like a D tier spell, but ODK is large and very slow, so the projectiles had no trouble finding their mark. I keep forgetting to equip Shield of Want, but just with Covetous, he drops 27.5k runes, which bought me a good few levels. Then we can cross the barrier into Irithyll thanks to the small doll. Aesthetically, Irithyll is probably one of the prettiest FromSoft locations in my opinion. But practically, boots on the ground perspective, this place stinks. Nothing conveys that reality better than the first run from Yorshka to Sully's boss room. You've got invisible enemies that will try to grab you and one-shot you, mini-bosses that never leash, water that makes it hard to move, the nastiest, most disgusting enemies you'll ever see, literal shit disguised as items to keep you there longer, and, if you can believe it, that's not even the bad part. Once you make it past these knights, waiting for you up the stairs is approximately 1 million dogs with a full complement of invisible sorcerers waiting to ruin your day. Once you make it through all of that, you can unlock a shortcut to Yorshka Church that is guaranteed to lower your blood pressure. I then made a pit stop at Firelink to check in on Greirat, and not seeing him there, I feared the worst. After looking up where his ashes would be if he had died, I went to check, and sure enough, there they were. Bummer. This isn't a total loss because you can still buy the Candlestick from the ashes you just picked up. Sorry, Greirat. #worth. I can't go fight Sully yet because ain't no way I'm beating that guy with Snap Freeze and Deep Soul. Also, there's a Little Miss someone we need to rescue down in the dungeons. Couple of things to do here. Grab any large Titanites and keys that you can find. Jumper's Key, Old Cell Key, just grab them all. Run past Carla for now and make your way into the profaned capital. Grab the Undead Bone Shard and light the bonfire. Backtrack to these hallways and into the swamp area. On top of this roof is Sorcerer Smeepus, maybe? Well, anyways, we gotta get him because he has our Logan Scroll, which will give us Soul Spear and Homing Soul Mass. Deep Soul is the best spell to use in this fight, because I had it equipped already, and then you can use the old cell key to free Nobody and get the gold serpent ring if you'd like. And just up these stairs you can get the jailer's key ring, which we can then use to let Carla out of her cell. I also picked up the bellowing dragon crest ring and the Xanthus ashes. With Logan's scroll now in hand, we can consider fighting Pope Sully and Yorm. Now, word of warning, out of every single Souls boss ever conceived, Pontiff Sulyvahn is the crowned king for how many attempts it's taken me to beat a boss. The first time I fought him, it took me 37 tries, more than Nameless, Malenia, Midir, heckin' Royal Rat Authority. I have the run back from Yorshka to Sully forever imprinted on my brain, and after a 3-year hiatus, I was a bit worried. But I'd never tried to beat him with sorceries before, so there was some hope. My strongest sorceries right now are obviously Great Heavy Soul Arrow and Soul Spear. I figured Soul Spear for Pontiff because he's got that Shadow Clone Jutsu, which leaves GHSA for Yorm. Feeling somewhat hesitant about the Sulyvahn fight, I TP'd to Profane Capital where I would challenge the Giant. Sometimes the fights in these runs can feel like you're trying to drive a nail into a piece of wood with a screwdriver. They're just awkward and frustrating. That was not the case here. Great Heavy Soul Arrow is a hammer, and this guy is about to get nailed. I wouldn't be surprised at all if GHSA is better at beating Yorm than the gimmick weapon you're supposed to use. 2 casts at Yorm's head causes him to stagger, and when he does, every subsequent cast while he's down does triple damage. He can barely stand up by the time you've got him knocked down again. Yorm is slightly more aggro in the second phase, but for the most part it's just a repeat of stage 1. A few more casts of Great Heavy Soul Arrow, and I'm feeling good from that one. Discard Great Heavy Soul Arrow, and we can head towards Sulyvahn. The anxiousness I felt going into the boss room was quite high, but it almost entirely dissipated when a single cast of Soul Spear took out 20% of the Pontiff's HP bar. It then completely vanished when another singular cast took out the Shadow Clone. Sulyvahn, simply outmatched, was taken down with 3 more casts of Soul Spear on only my second attempt, and I was very relieved. A more superstitious me would have taken this for the omen it would turn out to be. But riding high from those victories, I sprinted towards Aldrich and Anor Londo, making sure to forget about this bastard behind this corner. When thinking about the run, I was chiefly worried about Pontiff and Yorm. How naive I was. Keep in mind that I had just used both of my strongest sorceries, and Aldrich is even more resistant to dark than he is magic. So the spells I could get from Carla are going to be even less effective than the ones I already have. There is also a delusional level of hubris in thinking that I could beat Aldrich with Farinhail when I couldn't even beat Watchers with it. I also brought with me Twisted Wall of Light, which, let's be honest, this is just Tope's Barrier 1.0. It's a neat party trick, but not in any way practically useful. I tried and tried and tried again to no avail. Homing Soulmask didn't perform much better, and after a dozen or so attempts, I was getting nowhere. Ultimately, I figured, oh well, I can come back later after Archives when I'm higher level and have more spells, so no big deal. If you've played Dark Souls 3 recently, you are probably laughing at me right now. Unbeknownst to me, I apparently agreed to some sort of monkey's paw situation where Pontiff Sulyvahn and Yorm wouldn't be an issue, but almost every boss afterwards was going to be a nightmare. There's really only one other route available to me, and that was Dancer, but there's a pre-boss Grandma sitting in the way. Happy to finally find a use case for Snap Freeze, we send Emma into an early retirement and start the Dancer fight. The fight does start immediately, so we can't rest and change spells, so I use this time to practice dodging for a bit. For those unaware, Dancer is really weak to dark damage, and we recently acquired 2 dark sorceries, Affinity and Soul Greatsword Dark Edition. I think I tried both, but settled on Affinity. I'm not sure why. Probably because it was easier. But yeah, Affinity deals over 800 damage per cast, so this fight actually took less time than the Grandmother fight did. With Dancer down, we can discard Affinity and get some levels with the 80,000 or so runes she drops. Once you get up this ladder, it's a good idea to stop by Consumed King's Garden, mostly for the 3 Titanite chunks that are there. Remember to open the shortcut for later. We can then skip past most of early Lothric Castle and head towards the dragons. I don't know why, but the dragons decided to just not breathe fire this time, which was very fortuitous for me. Inside we can open the gate and get the elevator for the dragon armor fight. I had opted for the easy path for the past 5 or so bosses, so I figured I should just equip Fair and Hail, grit my teeth, and get ready for a proper tussle. Okay, so according to the statistics, you gotta go with Homing Soul Mass on this fight, alright? It is what it is, baby. There were still a few incidents even with this spell, but in the end we got there. Dragon Armor drops another 80k souls thereabout, so back to Firelink to level, and then into the archives, right? I don't have to do Aldrich before this, right? Wait, you're not. This isn't serious, right? I have to kill Aldrich before I do this? Are you kidding me? I can't accept this. Yeah. You gotta beat Aldrich before entering the library. And the only sorcery I have to do that right now is Farron fucking Hail. It's so doomed. This is gonna be awful. Maybe it'll slap him, who knows? Maybe it'll clap this guy's disgusting slug cheeks. It's not a sentence I want to repeat. Wow. Here we go. Yeah. There it is. I'll save the details, but without being hyperbolic, it took me so long to beat Aldrich that you can literally see my facial hair getting longer over the course of the 3 or 4 days it took me to beat this guy. But in the end, we did it. Oh, what the fuck? Finally, we can go back to the archives, pick up the key, and enter the library. Dark Edge is the last damaging sorcery I have, so I use that to complete the Wild Sage chase around the archives, and as our reward we get the Crystal Scroll, which lets us buy Homing, Crystal Soul Mass, and Crystal Soul Spear. Before the Prince's boss room, grab the elevator and pick up the super secret slab for a plus 10 weapon. I loaded up Crystal Soul Spear for Lothric for the same reason I used Soul Spear on Sullivan, and when I entered the fight I quickly realized I remember almost nothing about these brothers. Initially I was way out of my depth, but I gotta say I really developed an appreciation for this fight. One of my favorite parts about FromSoft games is when you can develop kind of like a systematic, consistent approach to a fight, and that happened here. If you steady chant immediately after entering the fog and don't move, Lorien will get caught in a loop. With the massive amount of damage I'm doing at this point, 4 casts of CSS knocks him into stage 2. Here you can rely on sound cues to dodge the balls of light that Lothric is casting. And if you've stayed by the fog wall up until now, Lorien will again be stuck in a loop and you can cast another 4 CSS to get him to the point where he needs to be healed. Then run away as far as you can and pray that Lorien doesn't TP right on top of you. In my experience, it's a coin flip as to whether he will or not. Stage 2 is definitely a lot trickier, and there's some finicky stuff going on with not being able to target Lothric all the time. And of course there's still some rage-inducing moments like this. But the consistency of the start of the fight took most of the sting out of these moments. Crystal Soul Spear will pierce both brothers, but it felt like you needed a really solid angle for that to work, so I tried not to plan the fight around that. Play your cards right, keep hounding the brothers with Crystal Soul Spears, and you too will be the vanquisher of the 4th Lord of Cinder. After Princes, we light the 4 heads and cutscene our way into Koft. We currently only have Homing Crystal Soul Mass for Soul of Cinder, but you can access the second DLC before the fight if you're so inclined. Here you will find great soul dregs pretty early on in the level, and you don't have to beat any bosses. Sweet. When we have that, we can enter the Cinder fight. Great Soul Dregs only does marginally more damage, but it has a higher range and a faster cast time, so GSD it is. The fight was going well, but something still felt deeply unsatisfying. A feeling that reached a head when Gwyndor deflected my Great Soul Dregs like a DBZ character deflecting a Ki Blast. Problem was, the Count Sorcerer staff, the highest sailing staff in the game, was locked away in a mimic within the profaned capital, Soulstream was sitting alone on a corpse within the Grand Archives, and my only means of getting any more upgrade materials resides somewhere in Archdragon Peak. Okay, so back to Grand Archives. Use Hidden Body to help ease my travel pains, and grab Soulstream. Now, Soulstream is easily one of the worst spells in the game. It's a classic high-risk, low-reward proposition. The spell has an obscene cast time, it does not track, you cannot move it, it stuns your own character, and as your reward for all of this trouble is that it does less damage than every other late-game option. Cool, but I had a plan in mind. The start of that plan involves us facing the Consumed King.
I will not give him up.
I typically don't love cheesing bosses, but when they exhibit this level of bullshittery, I'm keen to make an exception. You ain't never gonna see me complaining about someone cheesing Bed of Chaos. His first phase basically doesn't exist, but when he enters his second phase, all hell breaks loose. I don't know the mechanical specifics of his hitbox, but the way it's experienced is something like this. This section is fair play. If you get hit, it's kind of your fault. This is the plausible deniability zone, and this one is the fuck you why not area. Contact in this region has a 40-70 shot at killing you and a 100% chance at making you rage. This is ultimately not a boss I'm willing to spike my Cortisol levels for, so what you can do instead is bait him over to this little tree area on the opposite side of the arena where you come in. Run around to the other side of the tree, and now you're free to take a nice vacation or do whatever you want. Behind his arena you can grab Path of the Dragon emote, which grants access to the Archdragon Peak. Once here, make sure to grab this bonfire or you're gonna have a pretty bad time. Ancient Wyvern is another gimmick fight where you're supposed to run around this arena without dying, and eventually end up on this platform above the dragon's head where you can drop attack it and one-shot it. Of course, we cannot do that, but what we can do instead is stand there casting Soulstream as many times as is necessary. In addition to dropping 900 Benjamins, you'll also be teleported to an area where you can run around this ledge and pick up the Dragon Chaser's ashes, which unlocks Titanite chunks at the Maiden Firelink. Then transpose the soul of Voiceros from Ludless, lifeless corpse and take that over to the Profaned Capital. Inside this church building, I guess, you can find a mimic that, when defeated, will drop the Court Sorcerer Staff. Take that back to Firelink, upgrade it with the souls we got from the dragon, and the difference in damage is actually very underwhelming. Even at 60 int, the spell buff is only 12 more than the staff you start with, which when casting Homing Crystal Soul Mass, quick maths shows an increase of about 40 total damage. Each individual crystal is only doing 8 more damage. So yeah, a bit of a letdown, but that's okay. Now we are properly ready for Soul of Cinder. I don't know what the general consensus is, but I think Soul of Cinder is one of the better designed fights from the Souls series. Probably not totally fair to say because his second phase is just recycled Gwyn, but usually my deaths to this guy are exceedingly fair. The Sphere Charge on his Lance moveset can be a little awkward, but other than that, thumbs up. Homing Crystal Soul Mass does work in this fight, especially at 60 int. I was confused at first, but you can force this spell to do double damage very consistently if you're good enough. Basically, if an enemy is close enough to you, the initial appearance of the crystal masses will deal 1 instance of damage without breaking, and then they'll home in a second later doing another instance of damage. So sometimes this spell was doing upwards of 1500 damage per cast. That's pretty good. The Gwyn portion of this fight is just easier than the first phase, and after 6 or 7 casts of Homing Crystal Soul Mass, Gwyndor falls. Oh, he's dead. Oh, we did it. Oh, we did it. We did it. Yay. First playthrough in 3 years. We did it. Here is my tier list, and let me know if you think I should allow weapon buffs in these runs. Usually I don't use them because they require a weapon plus the buff, but I think it could be fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.